Is this one from a vet? Like, for animals? Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, going through your crazy pills?
Yeah, something like that. What you doing over there?
Just coming over here to help you get this episode started.
Oh. Well, in that case, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of B-Movie Enema the series. My name is Jeff Arbuckle. I'm the resident B-Movie proctologist on duty. That over there is my trusty partner, Nurse Disembodied Nurse. How's it going?
Doing swell. How about you?
Anyway, I sit at the edge of the great B-Movie poop chute. It helps select movies each week and sends them through. Isn't that right, PC? Cool. So, you're gonna send us the movie for this week? Well, wait, what do you mean that you already did?
Jeff.
I mean, I don't see anything over here.
Jeff?
PC, you've left your comic books all over the place down here. That's not a way to take care of stuff like that, man. Anyway, I'm not seeing a movie around here or anywhere.
Jeff, I got it from PC earlier.
Wait, you did?
Yeah, PC and I were talking earlier about some stuff. We got to talking about the movies this year and how last week we saw another movie from Lindsay Shantef.
Yeah, wait, don't tell me there's a fourth movie of his in the poop chute.
No, well, at least I don't think there is. I kind of hope there isn't. I'm a little Shantef'd out.
Oh, thank God.
No, we talked about how you really didn't like that spy movie, The Second Best Secret Agent in the Whole Wide World.
No, I definitely did not.
No, you didn't. I kind of liked it. PC thought you'd really like it, and, well... yeah, you were really grumpy, so we wanted to try again. We hoped this one would make up for it.
Oh, okay, well, this one is kind of interesting. This week we have Deadlier Than the Male. I think this one will do pretty well, Nurse.
We thought it would too.
Well, yeah, thanks, guys. So here's the deal. This might come across a tad bit recognizable to you Animaniacs who've been watching this show for a little while. Back in season 3, we looked at the movie Some Girls Do, and that was actually a sequel to this movie. That movie and this movie were part of the 60s influx of Euro espionage films that were getting cranked out in the wake of the success that were the first few James Bond films. Now, yes, we've already had one this year that was kind of part of that, the aforementioned The Second Best Secret Agent in the Whole Wide World. As was the case with that movie, some of the Bond knockoffs weren't too great. They only kind of superficially understood the series that they were trying to copy. They didn't quite understand exactly what ingredients made Bond so cool. Now, part of that was the writing. Some of it was the tension in the film. Some of it was the action choreography. Some of it was just simply the swagger of Sean Connery that made all of those Bond films so iconic. However, Deadlier Than the Male and Some Girls Do had a different result. These were more of the top-tier Euro spy and Euro espionage films in the same vein as the American films Our Man Flint and In Like Flint. Now, those American films, the Flint movies, were more of a parody, but still had the right ingredients. Now, the others that I talked about, Deadlier Than the Male and Some Girls Do, feature the character Bulldog Drummond. Now, in these two films, Drummond is played by Richard Johnson, and as I previously stated in the Some Girls Do episode, Johnson was nearly Bond himself. If he doesn't possess the exact same ruggedness as Connery, he at least had some of the quality on the physical side of things. He also has a certain charisma to him that I think is easy to like, and you kind of buy him as being extremely capable in handling and dealing with stuff that he's confronted with. And I buy that you can bring this version of Bulldog Drummond in and he'll get the job done. Like with its sequel, Some Girls Do, Deadlier Than the Male doesn't just star Johnson. It isn't just directed by the same guy, Ralph Thomas. It isn't that both are produced by Betty E. Box, but it also features two of the same writers, David D. Osborne and Liz Charles Williams. So even though we are watching the movies in backwards order, if you saw that episode we did for Some Girls Do, you'll get the same vibes and impression from Deadlier Than the Male. But there is one significant person from the writing side of things that is here for this film that was not part of Some Girls Do. Credited as one of the writers is Jimmy Sangster. Now, Sangster was a major part of the Hammer film stable. He wrote or co-wrote several of their popular horror films, including The Curse of Frankenstein, Dracula, Revenge of Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Brides of Dracula, Dracula Prince of Darkness, Lust for a Vampire, and The Horror of Frankenstein. That last one he actually also directed and produced. But we've actually watched a movie that he has been part of the screenwriting team on before previously.
We did?
We sure did. In 1980, he was one of the writers for John Huston's Phobia.
Well, that's neat. I think I liked that movie.
Yeah, and I think you're going to like this movie too.
Well, then what are we waiting for? Let's get things started.
Well, let's do what the lady says. We'll see you after the first portion of Deadlier Than the Male. I guess I should make quick mention that the print of the movie that we have has its German title on the film, Heiße Katzen. That translates to Hot Cats.
Hot cats?
Hot Cats. But this movie really does start pretty strongly. We meet the deadly Irma Eckman, played by the lovely Elke Sommer. Sommer was born in Berlin in 1940 and was discovered by Italian filmmaker Vittorio De Sica when she was still a teenager. Then in the 60s, she was one of the biggest sex symbols in Hollywood. This allowed for her to appear in several fairly big films opposite the likes of Paul Newman, Bob Hope, and James Garner. But perhaps the movie that a lot of people of a certain age would recognize her from is the second film featuring Peter Sellers as Inspector Clouseau, which is called A Shot in the Dark. It didn't actually have the Pink Panther title in it, but it was an Inspector Clouseau film. That same year, 1964, Sommer posed for Playboy, which she would do again in 1967. She continued to work fairly consistently into the 70s and beyond and appeared in a couple of Mario Bava classics, Lisa and the Devil and Baron Blood. Curiously, in the 1980s, she had a pretty serious and fairly long-running beef with Zsa Zsa Gabor. From what I understand, this started in 1984 when they both appeared on Circus of the Stars. Do you remember that show, Circus of the Stars? It was such a weird, I feel like it was always on in the summertime, like maybe when there was reruns or something. Anyway, it was always a weird thing to see. I never watched it, but I always remember the commercials. But I guess the two of them just didn't really like each other. Later in German society pages of mags and papers, Gabor and her husband, Frederick von Anhalt, continued to speak ill of Sommer, which led to Sommer suing them for libel and being rewarded over $3 million in damages.
I wouldn't mess with her. She's handing out cigars that'll blow the brains out the back of your head.
Hey, definitely. She proves the thesis of the title of this movie in the first few minutes. She assassinates that guy, then she just takes a boat over and then spears another dude.
I gotta admit, she's pretty damn cool. Stick it to the patriarchy, sister.
Yeah.
You giving me issues over there? That would be like a man to give me issues.
No, I'm, can we just move on?
That's what I thought.
Okay, so Elke Sommer's Irma is usually partnered with another deadly lady, Penelope. Penelope was played by Sylvia Cassina, and Cassina was born in Yugoslavia, a little older than Summer, and also fairly well established by the time that she was cast in this movie. She was a beauty pageant kid as a teenager. She got offered modeling work in her early 20s while at university, where she studied physics. Wow. I mean, smart and pretty. Anyway, she was also pretty shy. However, she was later convinced to be the stage miss at a leg of an Italian bicycle race. And a picture of her kissing the winner of the leg got published all over Europe, which led to her being noticed by an Italian filmmaker. And she became fairly well known for being leads in comedy films. In this, Penelope is a little man crazy.
Hey man, I get it. She likes to play with her food.
That she does. Now, one more person I want to call out in this segment is the actress playing Brenda, the girlfriend of Bulldog Drummond's nephew, Robert. She's played by Virginia North, who obtained the official title of Lady White. North's career was fairly short. This was her very first film appearance. She also appeared in Some Girls Do as one of the villain's robot ladies. Outside of film, she was a model, and she specialized in swimwear modeling. And while she did have a role as Olympie in the criminally underrated Bond film On Her Majesty's Secret Service, as one of the many girls in Blofeld's den of sleeper assassins, her most endearing and famous role was her very last one. In 1971, she appeared as the silent beauty Volnavia, who assisted Vincent Price in The Abominable Dr. Phibes. I love her in that movie. She's totally loyal to the Mad Doctor, but they don't seem to be love interests. His revenge is all about the various doctors who failed to save his wife's life. He's consumed by that, and he's got a pretty assistant who is likely just a mad killer who has a place to go to do mad killing. And while they do like to dance, and they are very devoted to one another, there doesn't really seem any real indication that they have a romance. She's just kind of part of the general visual that surround Dr. Phibes.
Oh, so pretty assistants are just part of the scenery for a doctor. I see how it is.
No, now wait. Yeah, she is part of the total visuals of that movie. But then she becomes kind of so much more interesting for being silent and for being as demented as Phibes. It's a whole package. So, cool it over there, Gloria Steinem.
Just busting your chops. Hey, by the way, I got these cigars. Would you like one?
Hey, you know what? I haven't had a cigar in a long time. I'll take one of those.
Here you go. Excellent.
What was that last part?
Oh, nothing.
This is smooth. Thanks for giving me one of these, nurse.
You're very welcome. I hope you have a blast with that cigar.
Huh, that's kind of a weird thing to say. Anyway, I feel like this movie is very closely sticking to the James Bond formula. The movie opens with a couple of enticing and inciting events. The guy is killed on the plane, which then explodes, and then there's a second guy who's killed. And that's what brings Bulldog Drummond into the whole thing. Remember, the Drummond is not a spy. He's basically just an adventurer. But he's good at investigating stuff, and he has lots of resources from being rich. He's investigating the deaths seen at the start of the movie, and that's bringing him directly into the crosshairs of the killer ladies Irma and Penelope. So, with that, I think we should get back into the movie. What do you say, nurse?
I agree, we should. I can't wait to see what these two sexy assassins do next. I'm sure it'll go a long way in bringing down the terrible patriot... Jeff? Was that the cigar? What happened?
Nope, that was just an explosive fart. Pay no mind over here. It's all okay over here. Just, God, did that cigar make me do that? Just go back to the movie. Alright, so let's talk about a few more elements on the production of this film and some of the decisions that were made regarding the production of the film. The film was initially announced to the public as Female of the Species in 1964. However, the filming did not get underway for a couple of more years. Interestingly, this was the first film made by a production company known as Amerlon. While that itself is barely interesting, the parent company that owned Amerlon was In-Flight. And In-Flight was a company that specialized in showing in-flight movies on airplanes.
Then isn't it kind of weird that the movie opens with an assassination that ends with an airplane exploding?
Yeah, I'm guessing they didn't play this movie during flights. Now, according to Ralph Thomas, the film's life actually began as a pilot for a television series. And I think that could have been a pretty good idea. Of course, during the same time, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and Get Smart were going on in the United States. In the UK, they had the series The Avengers and The Saint. A show like Bulldog Drummond might have been a hit. It would have had some of the attitude of Bond, but actually something kind of different still with its own sensibilities and identity. However, Thomas also said that he made the movie pretty much out of greed. He said that the production company was more than willing to pay him a ton of money. And of course, this also meant he could go to beautiful locations, which made the movie easy to look good and look beautiful on film. He naturally had a ton of fun making this movie, and I assume Some Girls Do was also a fun one to work on. But he wasn't quite as invested as you think he would be, despite the quality of the picture itself. Now, someone who did put a little extra investment into the movie was our star Richard Johnson. Johnson actually kind of hated the character of Bulldog Drummond. I'm guessing the character was a little harder and less likable to many modern audiences in his books because his films have always been fairly well appreciated. Johnson, though, said he had to consciously try to make the character his own. He was constantly infusing his own self into the character, and he was doing this more than he ever had in his career leading up to this point. They started from a clean slate to build Bulldog Drummond up because he found the source character someone he simply could not respect. He thought of Drummond as a bigoted, brutal, Nazi-like character. So he threw himself into remaking the character and making the character someone he could actually like and respect on some level at the very least.
I like the character. He seems like a fairly suave, James Bond-like hero.
Now, I went on a big diatribe back when we watched The Second Best Secret Agent in the Whole Wide World about how poor that film's plot was. It was overly complicated by the fact that the plot itself was not able to sustain its runtime. This film is so much better. I think you could put this film up against many Bond films in terms of intrigue, neat things to watch and see how it plays out. And this movie has no shortage of beauties. What's most important is that I buy the character of Bulldog Drummond. Drummond proves himself when he has to do a fight. Sure, I mean, that's helped because when we see him for the first time, he's doing like karate training. So that was a little bit of a shortcut to say that he has some physicality that he can call upon. But I believe that he can suss out the pieces of two seemingly unconnected deaths that start to connect to other deaths to reveal the answer. I believe he has access to the resources and that he has charm to get those resources to help him out. These were all things that were so painfully absent from The Second Best Secret Agent in the Whole Wide World. This movie is simply a joy to watch. It's truly on the level, or at least in the orbit of the level, of a Bond film.
Wow, high praise indeed.
Indeed, and if you didn't notice, this is a 1967 movie that begins with a woman offering up a cigar to a man that will literally send a bullet through the back of his head. We even see the wound. Moments later, she uses a harpoon gun to spear another guy, and we basically see the whole thing. It's got a kind of a toughness to it, and it's a sexy movie as well.
Yeah, Penelope wants to have sex with all the guys. She's always looking for something sexy to wear in Irma's closet. Irma is not above using her own sexuality to get close to men. It's got a little heat to it.
Yes, and that was a point of contention between the producers of the film and the British Board of Film Censors, who assigned the film an X certificate rating.
What? An X rating? That's crazy! There hasn't been a single tit in this movie.
Well, they came down hard on three concepts that we've seen in this movie. They got pretty uppity about women assassins. This was still during the time when women were typically seen as petite, nurturing, and gentle souls.
Bullshit. We can kill with the best of them.
I believe it. They also turned their nose up at what they saw as torture in the scene in which Robert was taken by Penelope and tortured and hogtied to get info about his uncle. Pretty tame, but it was heavily implied that he was pretty badly hurt when they wanted to get that info. But the big one, though, was promiscuity. They didn't like how much sex people were having so freely in this movie.
That's pretty lame. Boo, British censors, boo!
Yeah, stuff like that is fairly silly. It's not like the Bond movies didn't have bad girls or people having sex all over the place, and they certainly had women often enticingly dressed. But whatever, there are more bad girls and promiscuity to come, so let's get into the final act of Deadlier Than the Male.
I have to admit, that scene right at the beginning of the last segment where we see the big reveal of the bad guy and he turns in his chair was pretty funny. It's like, I bet if you backed the camera up and could see his legs, I bet he was doing that little scooty thing with his feet to turn himself around. Real threatening there, guy.
Yeah, I kind of wish they did show that, but I liked the big action set piece with the big chessboard. That was a really neat way of building a little tension and forcing Drummond to think on his feet. And that was a really cool scene. But what's your final grade for Deadlier Than the Male?
This is definitely one of the better James Bond influenced flicks we could show. Between this and Some Girls Do, I wish that they had more of these movies with this guy. I liked what was going on in these movies. That said, I do wish Drummond was dressed more like a slick and suave guy and not in a bunch of Mr. Rogers cardigans. It makes him a little less cool when they could have turned up the cool and sexy. Generally, I could tell this movie had a pretty good budget. The sets, the way it was shot, the effects, they put their whole ass into this movie and it shows. As much as I do like this movie though, I do have a major beef. Why, after a whole movie of badass chicks doing badass assassin shit, is the main villain a dude? Just some crusty old white dude. Really? Lame. I don't know. Maybe it would have been too far-fetched for 1967, but I gotta dock a poop for that. Okay, now that that's out of the way, for my final score, I give this Diet James Bond film a very solid 4 poops out of 5.
Not too bad. I have a few more things to mention here. One of the women working for the evil Carl Peterson is Grace. Now, Grace appears to be working for Peterson under some duress and wants to leave him. She's played by Susanna Lee. Now, the year before this film, Lee was the star of The Deadly Bees for Amicus Pictures, then crossed over to Hammer Films to appear in Lust for a Vampire in 1971. In 1973, she also appeared in Son of Dracula, which starred Harry Nilsson and Ringo Starr, and also featured a lot of other musicians like Peter Frampton, Keith Moon, and Leon Russell. Also, we have a connection to last week's movie, Night After Night After Night, which was made by Lindsay Shantef, who made the movie this has been compared to this whole time, the second best secret agent in the whole wide world. In this movie, Drummond meets Peggy Ashenden, the secretary to Sir John Bloodlow, the man who hires Drummond to investigate the murders of Keller and David Wingard at the beginning of the movie. Peggy is played by Justine Lord, who played the wife of the freaky judge from Night After Night After Night. Finally, what did you think of that theme song for the movie, Nurse?
That wasn't bad at all. Got me in the mood for the movie and had a little James Bond style to it.
Yeah, it definitely had a little bit of a Bond sound to it. Now, that was performed by the Walker Brothers. At the time this movie came out, and that they did the theme song, they were basically at the peak of their popularity. The Walker Brothers were kind of a softer rock compared to some of the others out at the same time. I kind of think of them as something closer to maybe like Gary Puckett and the Union Gap.
Who?
Gary Puckett and the Union Gap.
Are you like 70 years old?
Yeah, I kind of am. Anyway, that's the type of pop music band that I kind of think of the Walker Brothers as being very similar to. These types of bands had the more ballad type sound to them. They had power ballads of the 60s version style. Most of the time you think of power ballads, you think of like the hair bands of the 80s. But the kind of clean cut ballads of the 60s were Gary Puckett and Union Gap, the Walker Brothers, and a bunch of others. But their first hit, Make It Easy on Yourself, was a ballad written by Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Now, David was known for being the lyricist often used by John Barry, and the pair had teamed up for a couple of Bond themes. As an aside, I kind of recognize a little bit of a sound-alike take on Barry's alternate Bond theme titled 007 in an early scene of this movie. Anyway, the Walker Brothers went to the top of the UK charts in 1965 with Make It Easy on Yourself. They followed that up with a number 3 hit, My Ship Is Coming In. Then they hit number 1 for a second time in half a year with the song that I know best from them, The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore. Their next several singles weren't that big, but they were hanging around in the charts for months at a time. By the time this movie was in wide release, the trio had kind of broken up over creative differences. However, they did reunite for a few years in the 70s. However, despite the band never really being able to stick together for more than 3 or 4 years at a time, the band experienced some very interesting cult status and interest over the years. A lot of this seemed to have to do with the large interest and popularity of Scott Walker. Now, the Walker Brothers were a stage name. Scott was born Noel Scott Ingle, with John Walker having been born John Mouse, and Gary Walker was born Gary Leeds, and Gary Leeds is the only surviving member of the trio as it is. They were all Americans, but John and Gary remained partners for a while, which led to a joint autobiography being written about them being in the Walker Brothers. John passed away in 2011. But Scott was the bassist and mostly only did harmony vocals, but he was the one that kind of became the most popular and famous of the trio. That fame came quick, and it had a massive impact on Scott's well-being. He became reclusive. His music became more experimental, and he started to kind of take on this almost messianic persona in the world of music, and he would go on to inspire a ton of artists. Scott passed away in 2019 from cancer. But at the absolute zenith of the Walker Brothers' fame around 1966, it was said that they were more popular than the Beatles. Now, it's not likely that that was really true. It's more likely the Walker Brothers, and particularly John Walker, were maybe more representative of very pop rock in Britain that the Beatles used to represent before their transition into the more experimental songs and compositions of the time. It could have just simply been a thing that British teen girls were cutting more pictures of John Walker out of pop music mags and hanging them on the wall than they were of Paul McCartney for a brief period of time. Anyway, the Walker Brothers, the final piece to the very brief popularity of these Bulldog Drummond films that we can cover here.
That was interesting, but I gotta go do a thing on an airplane. Some guy paid me to take care of a situation because this other guy is refusing to sell his collection of rare Pokemon cards to the dude who will pay me $1 million to get that collection at any cost.
Oh, you're gonna kill a guy, aren't you?
What? No, I wouldn't do that. But I will blow up that guy's plane after I find out where those cards are.
Now that's, You know, you're kind of terrifying sometimes, you know that?